Alright, it's time to talk about the Vanguard class in patch 7.2 as Space Marine 2. His best perks, what I think is one of his best build setups overall currently. The Vanguard really is blessed with an abundance of amazing perks. He's kind of like the tactical in that regard, and really this guy has been in a strong position since the launch of the game. That's no different here with the patch 7.0 prestige perk update. And the main thing I want to go through here would be his core perks, team perks, gear perks, signature perks, and I'll cover like what I think is one of his best builds at the moment. But primarily this is supposed to be a perk tree video, starting with moving target. Each melee attack you land reduces the range damage you take by 2% up to 20%. If you do not land a melee attack for 5 seconds, the effect ends. I've used this perk quite a bit, especially against Chaos, and when you stack it in conjunction with things like close combat focus, restless fortitude, and the positive synergy it has with the combat knife perk hard target for 15% less range damage during a light combo, it does pretty much let you ignore range damage, and that's quite useful. I just don't think this perk on its own is as useful as the other things in this tree, and these other range damage reduction bonuses are kind of better than this thing individually, and really it isn't that necessary to be used in conjunction with them in the first place. Now, melee mastery. Melee damage increases by 10% against Majora's level and higher enemies. This perk is pretty good. 10% melee damage is hard to come by as a flat bonus. It's just that this perk is a worse version of the other version of this perk on the sniper class. It's a 20% increase, and really I don't put this over upper hand, which is after a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge. You do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. Now, in Space Marine 2, the no knockback effect is so valuable primarily because the only things that actually one-shot you in this game, besides like accidentally blowing yourself up, are stuff like the good old zoanthrope balls chain stunning you, bone sword warriors double teaming you and just whacking you into oblivion, and this pretty much stops all of that while you are actually having this perk effect active. I take this on every single class I can. It also lets you get things off like your block charges on your chainsword or your knife, because if you have 2 adrenaline charges, you'll pretty much be able to whack through them regardless, as long as you have the no knockback effect, because this does stop like 90% of attacks in this game from knocking you over or making you move, which is really useful S tier perk. Now, Dualist, perfect parry and perfect block windows increase by 50%. I've used this perk in the past. It does help sometimes by catching like things at the very end of your parry window you would otherwise be unable to, but really in the vanilla game, if you're not playing with increased spawns or any mods like that, this doesn't happen that often, and for the most part, this is just like a win more perk, because the parry windows in this game are very forgiving. Like perfect parry on a fencing weapon has a 40 frame parry already, which is enormous, and perfect block is half of that with 20 active frames. Either way, both of those parry windows are very good, and you really don't need something like this in my opinion. Dualist is not super valuable once you actually learn the timings on the weapons. And honestly, it can teach you some bad habits by like, you swap off this class and the timings are all different for like the different weapons, which is not great. Now, close combat focus, you take 20% less range damage. Pretty boring effect, but this is very useful against Chaos primarily, because like 90% of the damage you take against Chaos is going to be range damage. It's just like 100% uptime, especially now that we have like armor regen on command with our prestige perks, which we'll get into eventually. But overall, I take close combat focus all the time against Chaos. I think it is better than Conviction in my opinion, or at least has like, a greater uptime. That's my logic there. Now, Conviction is also amazing because when your armor is fully depleted, you take 25% less health damage for 10 seconds. Now, the way this game works is, when your armor's gone, that's when you start getting smacked in the face to begin with. So having less health damage upon like when you actually need it the most, that is really good in this game. 10 seconds is a pretty long uptime on any perk effect in this game. Conviction and close combat focus are both very viable perks here, and really I can't fault you for taking either versus Chaos or Tyranids. Now, Retribution. After you are grabbed or knocked back, you deal 25% more melee damage for 15 seconds. This perk, 25% more melee damage is a pretty fat buff. 15 seconds is a pretty fat uptime. I like this perk a lot, to be honest. I don't think it is super meta because it does require you to like fuck up, but let's be real, you mess up in this game all the time because you are a human being, and this is something that's just going to happen to you regardless, and sometimes you get knocked over just because of things that are completely out of your control. So Retribution, pretty good. If you just want more melee damage, this is a pretty damn good perk, especially with things like the chainsword. Now, what is a really good perk is Consecutive Execution. Killing 7 enemies in rapid succession restores equipment charge by 1. Cooldown is 90 seconds. Equipment in this game is so valuable. A Melta Bomb can wipe out an Extremis pack all on its own. This was recently buffed to only require 7 enemies instead of 10, and really a 90-second cooldown is not super long in this game, not as good as like Sniper's Pattern of Excellence, but overall, Consecutive Execution still an S tier perk. Melta Bombs and Crack Grenades and Shock Grenades, they just carry encounters and they will body entire enemy packs. It's just a great perk. I pretty much always take this. Now, what is a pretty big noob trap here with honed reactions. When your health is less than 50%, your perfect dodge window is doubled. This sounds good until you realize that this class is not super useful with a perfect dodge to begin with, and perfect dodging really isn't that hard on its own. And the biggest negative of this perk is that it has a anti-synergy with the class purpose, which is to heal yourself, because 99% of players playing the Vanguard class are going to be taking either Adrenaline Rush or Unmatched Zeal, so they are not going to be below 50% HP for very long. So the actual uptime on this perk is pretty much non-existent in most matches, especially if you are playing well, and when it is active, it's not doing a whole lot for you. I would pretty much never take this. I think this perk needs a buff. Maybe just make it like a flat-out 25% increased perfect dodge window, because honestly, compared to these two, that might be a little bit more viable. Now, team perks. Melee champion, all squad members deal 15% more melee damage. This perk is pretty good. And really, this perk is only bad because it is outclassed by the other two team perks in this tree. Because on its own, 15% more melee damage, that's not a bad perk choice. It's just that Unmatched Zeal for 30% more HP on a Terminus or Extremis level kill is just incredible. This is probably the best perk in this entire tree, period. This grants healing to classes that don't have it at all, like Assault, Sniper, and the Tactical, and Unmatched Zeal is just a goated perk. Pretty much always take this. I would actually rank this way above Adrenaline Rush at this point. And Inner Fire, this did receive a nerf. All squad members can restore ability charge by 15% by performing finishers on Majora's level or higher enemies. This is still really good with, like, you know, the perk synergy on things like Banner for Invigorating Icon, Auspex Scan at times. It's just that healing your team in a game with limited healing is just so valuable, and perks like this are why Invigorating Icon is getting nerfed in the first place, because it pretty much just says every Extremis is a medkit, and this perk scales higher and higher depending on the higher difficulty you are playing on, because you're fighting more Extremis and potentially more Terminus in the next patch. So Unmatched Zeal, very, very good. Absolute god tier perk and over these other two. Now, for the gear perks here, we have Restless Fortitude. After a diving kick, you take 40% less range damage for 10 seconds. 40% less range damage is a huge chunk of damage reduction, and 10 seconds is a huge chunk of uptime. And this perk is pretty amazing against Chaos especially. Unfortunately, this perk does have a negative perk interaction with the build for the grapple execution, because your finishers, at least previously, did not count for the proccing of this 40% reduction, which is kind of unfortunate, but, you know, really you're going to be using this for things like Adrenaline Rush instead for that reason. Now, Shockwave. Diving kick additionally deals damage in a 5-meter radius. I've never felt this damage do a ton for me outside of, like, Removed Bramble, but, you know, I have also never felt collateral damage do a ton for me besides kicking people in the face. So both these perks I think are pretty mid, but Shockwave I do think is better, just because the AoE, you know, it hits everything around you. It clears out Bramble, and clearing out Bramble is pretty useful, especially with how high the Bramble Vine Warriors are currently. Now, collateral damage, diving kick deals 10% more damage and additionally damages enemies on the way to the grapple launcher's target. I have very rarely ever seen this damage increase be notable whatsoever, and really, I think this perk kind of sucks because it just does nothing in my experience. Maybe you think it's really good, maybe you've had a different experience with it, but overall, pretty D tier in my opinion. I just take Shockwave to clear Bramble. Now, Zone of Impact. Performing a finisher with the grapple launcher deals damage to nearby enemies. This damage is super noticeable. This thing will absolutely wipe enemies like Zoanthropes in the sky, Majoris around you, pretty much every single Minoris in a pack. Super positive synergy with Tactical Prowess for your automatic like refill on a 33% execute, or really any grapple finisher. Pretty much always take these two perks together. If you're using Zone of Impact, you're using a grapple execute build with Tactical Prowess. That's just how it is. And Zone of Impact, I would honestly go as far as say it's like an S tier perk for this build in particular, just because this damage is pretty crazy and you can loop entire packs. Now, tenacity. After killing 7 enemies in rapid succession, diving kicks damage increases by 40% for 15 seconds. This is a god-awful perk. This thing should be changed entirely. Like, it's pretty self-explanatory how bad this perk is. I would honestly like to see the actual stats on how many people are using this, because it must be like sub 10% of all Vanguard players. This perk is trash. Now, tip of the spear. Enemies hit by diving kick take 15% more range damage for 10 seconds. This is a pretty damn good perk, really good against chaos, really good synergy with restless, fortitude, and adrenaline rush if you're going for like this kind of build, because you just go into their face and you shoot them in the face, and guess what, you do more damage. And with us, our best weapon at the moment are the Oculus bolt carbine, and the bolt carbine and the headshot multipliers on this kind of go through the roof when you use things like tip of the spear. So pretty S tier. I take this all the time when I'm not taking a grapnel finisher build, and alternatively, if you're doing a grapnel finisher build, you're taking zone of impact anyways. Now, thrill of the fight. After a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge, you take 20% less health damage for 5 seconds. I love this perk, mainly because this perk tree kind of sucks anyways, but overall, thrill of the fight, pretty great stuff. 20% less health damage is a lot for us, and pretty much we lose our armor all the time on this class anyways, and this is really good for us because our contested health recovery on this 50% increase is already super, super good. So if we have no armor, we're not in like the worst position ever. This just makes that contested health recovery that much more valuable, because we're getting the damage reduction and we're getting our contested health back more easily. So overall, I think this is pretty A tier. I take this all the time now. This is a perk I used to take with Grim Determination. When grapnel launcher is in cooldown, weapon damage increases by 15%. Unfortunately, this perk only activates when both charges of your grapnel launcher are used up, which is pretty shitty in my opinion, because 15% is just not up that often. And if you're using like an execute build, you're not going to even have a grapnel down all that often to begin with. And like using both your charges is already pretty stupid for the most part. But Grim Determination, if you're using like an Adrenaline Rush build, it's not the worst thing ever. I just think it's kind of low value just because of that one aspect of it, especially when you can just have less damage, which equals you dying less. Now, combat readiness, grapnel launcher recharges 20% faster. It's just a 20% increase. It's pretty noticeable. Pretty good perk. Both these perks aren't unusable. It's just that I think currently Thrill of the Fight is better overall. But, if you want to take these two, you sure can. Alright, it's time to talk about these signature perks, starting off with the absolute mouthful of a perk, Tactical Prowess. Grapnel Launcher can activate a finisher not only on incapacitated enemies, but also on those who have less than 33% health, except Terminus level. And performing a finisher with the Grapnel Launcher restores its charge. This perk is pretty damn goated with Zone of Impact. It's just unfortunate that it has so many bugs around it, because sometimes you won't get the finisher, sometimes you'll get like the AoE of Zone of Impact and won't get your charge back, and you won't even get your armor back. And seeing the actual threshold of 33% health can kind of be hard sometimes. However, you can use the lock-on mechanic in this game. So if you lock on to an enemy and you stick a little red dot around their lock-on target, that means they're at 33% health or below. So keep that in mind. Overall, this is pretty A tier, would be S tier if it weren't for bugs, in my opinion, but still very useful, still very good. Now, Emperor's Blessing. Taking lethal damage restores all armor instead of incapacitating you. Cooldown is 120 seconds. So basically, every 2 minutes you don't die, and that's pretty good. I just think these two are better, because Adrenaline Rush will help you more in like an immediate fight, and Tactical Prowess will help you more in killing the thing that's trying to kill you in the first place. These two prevent you from dying more than this one, ironically, in my opinion, and really I think they outclass it in a lot of ways. Though if you really want to take this, you can. I just think it's the weakest of these options. Now, Adrenaline Rush. Melee kills of Majora's level or higher enemies restore health by 5%. This used to be 10%. They nerfed it, then they buffed this perk up from like what was 5% or something, maybe like 3%, up to 30%. So this was a huge buff to this perk, and now Adrenaline Rush is still S tier, just not as good. Either way, you can take both of these and your healing will be absolutely absurd. And really, I think as far as like the meta build for like most players would go, this is probably it. This is a pretty good perk setup for any level of player skill, and really this class is quite forgiving because it has everything it needs to keep you alive. More contested health on melee hits, more HP regen in a game with limited healing, 2 perks for it now, and more damage reduction than most guys, and also things like an increased parry window. So this is what I would take as a setup, like a basic perk setup. This pretty much works with like any type of build you want to do on this class, to be honest, any weapon setup. Just overall, very powerful stuff. Now, I'm going to talk about his prestige perks here for a second. Number one, battlefield awareness. If a target is within 8 meters, you deal 10% more range damage. This guy doesn't have a ton of good options on his prestige perks. Well, he actually has 4 good options and then like 2 mid ones. So really, battlefield awareness, if a target is within 8 meters, you deal 10% more range damage. That's good. More range damage in this game is just always good. It's kind of hard to come by, to be honest, and this guy is pretty much always within 8 meters of a target because you have a grapnel launcher. Pretty much always take this. Now, Exigency Charge. When your health is less than 25%, ability charge regenerates 15% faster. Absolute trash tier perk, especially on this class, because first of all, our grapnel recharge really isn't a big issue to begin with, and when you're below 25% health in this class, it probably lasts like a whopping 5 seconds, because you have unmatched zeal and you have adrenaline rush with most players, because I would say like 90% of players are probably still taking adrenaline rush, and maybe a little bit less than that, because people do have moved to tactical prowess a bit, but overall, this class, anything that has you be sitting, like has you sit at a lower HP on the Vanguard class, it's just not going to be very good because it's a negative class synergy. So I don't really know what they were thinking with this. Honestly, they probably weren't, but Exigency Charge, pretty F tier. Indomitable Spirit. While performing a gun strike, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back. If you want to be the ultimate no knockback boy, you could take this perk with upper hand, and you'll pretty much never get knocked over again off a perfect parry. It's just kind of redundant if we have upper hand, though, which is why I put it in like C tier, probably like D tier, to be honest. It's probably like the worst version of a knockback perk in this game, but you know, no knockback is still as powerful as ever, and gun strikes do get you knocked around sometimes. Fortitude. Health increases by 15%. Pretty boring effect, but health is super valuable in this game because, like I've mentioned multiple times, whenever your HP is low in this game, you have a base damage resist that goes up. So if your total HP is higher, your effective HP is that much more when you're at low HP, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does, but overall, Fortitude, really damn good. Also, the way medkits work in this game, for some people who are confused, this doesn't mean like you don't heal your mortal wound off of 2 medkits anymore. This just means like your total HP is higher, and really the way medkits work in this game as well is a 30% heal. It's not really based on like your total HP, so this won't like break that break point for the mortal wound. Sorry, that was a mouthful. It was a really weird way to say that, but anyways, hopefully you get what I'm saying. A launch for restoration. Using the grapnel launcher restores 1 armor segment. This is pretty goated. This is on command armor regen, and the way armor works in this game is as long as you have any amount of armor, the next melee hit will do literally nothing to your HP no matter what. So that is pretty amazing. And having any on command armor restore in this game, goated. And this just means you get armor when you want the most, which is when you were diving in on an enemy. And if you take this and you have tactical prowess, this will proc on the tactical prowess execute for 2 full armor restores. That's all of our armor. This pretty much just gets you all of your armor back. Now, restoration. Killing 7 enemies in rapid succession restores 1 armor segment. Cooldown is 15 seconds. That is a pretty good perk, not as good as launch restoration in my opinion, but you know, armor restore, that's like a little bit of a drip feed, ain't bad in this game. Cooldown is 15 seconds, that's pretty bad, not gonna lie. Like, I wish it was like 10 or something. Either way, you know, more armor is more armor, and I rank this far higher than, say, well-equipped Indomitable Spirit or Exigency Charge. And really, some people like well-equipped for an equipment damage increase by 20%, but this only hits 1 breakpoint with the crack grenade, and really, crack grenades already one-shot most of the things you actually want them to do. By most of the things, I mean, they one-shot sorcerers already, and that's like the biggest issue in this game for like most grenades in the first place. And really, like the zoanthrope stuff, you can already just like one-shot them immediately after tossing a crack grenade on them. Not super valuable, and like shock grenades, normal grenades, and melta bombs. Melta bombs already one-shot. Grenades are usually used for stuns, and shock grenades already kill and slow down the things you want them to. So I do not rank this very highly over these 4. Now, moving on to weapons, I would say the 2 best weapons currently on this class are the Bolt Carbine and the Oculus Bolt Carbine. Now, Bolt Carbine has the fastest TTK of any weapon on the Vanguard currently, especially with all of like his new range damage buffs. Unfortunately, the only negative of the Bolt Carbine is it has like no real instant reload mechanic outside of Gunstrike reload, but you know, this isn't like super necessary. If you want to use the Oculus for its finisher reload, that is a bit better, but overall, I'd say it's Bolt Carbine currently as the best weapon with this setup. Now, as for the best secondary on Vanguard, it is once again the heavy bolt pistol. I know, common theme. This gun is just kind of cracked right now. It really is the best sidearm in the game, and really when you're building it, you just want to go down damage, damage, damage for headshot damage, because all you want on this thing is damage. More gun strike damage, more headshots, more boom, more victory. Because right now, the heavy bolt pistol has the highest gun strike damage of any weapon in this game, including things like the plasma pistol. This thing just slaps. Like, there's really no other way to put it. The heavy bolt pistol is just the goat. And really, Neo Volkite pistol isn't horrific on this class. I use it against Chaos quite a bit to pop little cultist brains, or really more like detonate their everything. But overall, heavy bolt pistol is better, and especially if you're taking something like the Melta rifle for whatever reason, and you don't have like a super good range primary, this one makes up for your range primary very easily. I'm actually kind of shocked they gave this to everyone. But I digress. As for melee weapons, the Artificer block chainsword to take more advantage on our heavy hits while our block charges are up. This one's the best in this game. It makes your horde clear super good, probably like the overall best melee weapon in the entire game, not just block weapons. Like, this one just does work. And the way block weapons work is that once you get your 2 charges of perfect block, the first one gives you a 30% increase in your next melee hit, second one is 90%, and if you get like 2 charges at once into the adrenaline rush explosion, those buffs will stay for like a second or so. So the faster chainsword will get more attacks off than the relic version was, even though the base damage is higher on the relic one. This one really doesn't matter. Like, the speed is more important. And like, I'm just telling you this from like the playtime I've had this thing, and really you just watch videos of this. The only thing this one is really better at is like block damage, or excuse me, melee damage on bosses. It's just this one overall does more, and really is pretty goated. Same thing with the knife. Best knife is block knife. Block weapons, especially on Vanguard, are super useful because our parry really isn't as valuable to us on this class over pretty much all the other ones, because we have absurdly high contested health regen. And if you use the combo skip, which I'll try to plug the video in the corner here if I remember to. If I don't, you can check on my channel for the combo skip and how to do that with the chainsword, because the chainsword combo skip with full throttle on top of swift recovery for heavy attacks restore 100% more contested health on all like your heavy attacks here. That combined with our 50% pretty much means as long as you're slapping hordes, like even Minora's hordes with this chainsword and Vanguard, you just never die. But that is all I have to say about the Vanguard in this video. Hopefully you have a better understanding of his perk tree now, and I will go into his actual like weapon perks, some of his more niche builds at some point here. So if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And I also want to say thank you to all of my channel members. Your support means a ton. Peace, guys.